Hi everyone, and welcome to our event with the Altogether Network from Hachette. I am Jess, and I'm an SYP North events officer, and I've got short blonde hair and wearing a black top. Just a few things before we get started. We'd love for this event to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to submit questions using the question and answer function or chat in the chat box. We are recording this event, so if you would prefer your name not to come up when you're submitting a question, you can submit anonymously. We also would love to connect with you on Twitter, so you can connect with us at SYP North. And tonight we're using the hashtag SYP North with ATN, and I'll put all this information in the chat box as well. I'm going to pass you over to Tasha, who is going to be chairing this event and introducing you to our lovely panellists. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. So I'm Tasha. My pronouns are she and her. I have straight mid-length blonde hair. I'm wearing glasses and a green jumper. So now if Ronnie, Sarah and Kerri from Hachette's Altogether Network would like to introduce themselves. Don't know if you want to start, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. I'm Sarah Fortune. I work at Hachette in the Orion division, where I'm a project editor, and I'm also co-chair of the Altogether Network, which obviously you'll be hearing much more about tonight. I'm wearing glasses. I have shoulder length, strawberry blonde hair, and I'm wearing a grey jumper.
Thank you. Ronnie?
Yeah, sure. I'm Ronnie. I work in production at Hachette Children's, and I've got kind of mid to short curly brown hair with a grey jumper. I don't know how you describe it.
Awesome. Yes, spot on. Brilliant. Kerri?
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Kerri. I work in the international sales department at Hachette. I have also got glasses on, I've got long dark hair, and I'm wearing a cream jumper.
Thank you. So touched on it a bit there, but if you could tell us a bit more about yourselves, what your role is and how you got into publishing. Sarah again?
Yeah, so we'll go in that order again. Yeah, so I've been working in publishing now for, keep saying what year it is, thanks to COVID, but now I'm working in publishing for nearly 6 years. Graduated in 2014 and then started my first job in 2015 at a small independent publishers, and then essentially was a kind of the office assistant and stayed there, kind of progressed up to editor over 4 years, and then in 2019 moved to Hachette. I've been there since as project editor. It's sometimes called a desk editor as well, kind of project managing different books, cross fiction, non-fiction. And then I became a co-chair of the Altogether Network in January of this year, along with Emma Layfield, who works at Hachette Children's, and she's a picture development director North, based in Manchester, and she was our first employee to move to Manchester. So she kind of blazed the trail for all of this. So we run the network together. And just a really brief overview, so you'll hear a lot more, but our aim is to promote and represent staff from regional backgrounds and low socio-economic backgrounds, ensuring that the overall diversity of those two groups in publishing is increased.
Brilliant, thank you. And let's go to Ronnie again.
Yeah, sure. I work across 2 departments. I work in production, which I guess kind of a bit like Sarah is almost like a project manager of books, but more organizing, getting files and cover files from editors and kind of organizing the printing with the printers and checking advances and all the cool fun stuff, I guess. And I also work in operations, which is kind of a bit more behind the scenes kind of stuff to do with contracts and setting up ISBNs on systems and things like that. I've been in publishing for 5 years. I started out at DK, Dorling Kindersley, as an inventory manager, and then I moved to Hachette and moved department when I did. And yeah, that's where I am now.
Brilliant, thank you. And what about you, Kerri?
Yes, so I work in international sales. So I look after sales of all Hachette UK and Hachette US titles in France. So that's working with wholesalers, but also direct to bookshops. And I get to, visit Shakespeare and Co. when I do my trips to Paris. So that's my highlight of my career so far. I did French and Spanish undergrad at Manchester Uni. And then I did an MSc in publishing at Edinburgh Napier. And I was involved with SYP Scotland when I was up there. So I love SYP. And I got my job at Hachette in 2019. So I've been there just over 2 years, and I'm now a sales executive.
Perfect, thank you. I don't know if someone in particular wants to explain a bit more about the Altogether Network and how it started.
Sarah.
I can kick off with that, and then if anyone wants to jump in, they can. So the network was actually founded before I joined the company. So a lot of this is working on the history, kind of as I know it, of how the network came to be. But essentially, it's easier to explain in the context of the Hachette Changing the Story initiative. So there's the initiative which was founded by Charmaine Lovegrove, who is head of Dialogue Books, and Nick Davies, who's head of John Murray Press, both at Hachette. And in conjunction with our diversity and inclusion officer, they had the idea of, having a real initiative and kind of a real banner under which we could place kind of different initiatives and different ways of promoting diversity in Hachette and kind of in publishing. And I think it was where, in the last few years, those conversations have really started to happen much more. And it's kind of Hachette's way of really bringing everything together into kind of a one logical sort of, branding. And so through that, the employee networks were formed. And I will confess, I don't entirely know how each network was formed, whether HR had the idea or staff did and suggested them, but essentially,
I think this one was formed. It was formed by Jonathan and a lady called Katie, who was at Orion but has since gone freelance, I believe. But it was Jonathan and her who came up with the idea.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I was like casting our knowledge, we put it together. So Jonathan Patterson, who's still at Hachette, and Katie Brown, who is now, I think, at Bloomsbury actually. She's just moved there.
She's doing some of the northern, she's doing some of their Bloomsbury North stuff, I believe. Yeah,
she's kind of been involved in that area for a long time. And they're both from the north. I think they wanted to have a network when these networks formed. We have a network like the LGBTQ network. We have kind of one for wellbeing and mental health, and there's different kind of, there's Thrive network for employees from BAME backgrounds, and just kind of bring everyone together. And within that, Jonathan and Casey kind of want to shine a light on socio-economic diversity and regional diversity, because they kind of talked about a lot less. But actually, all of the networks, it's great that we get to work together, because so many of the issues each network has in terms of improving diversity, it's quite a cyclical thing. So, so the socio-economic diversity of publishing is at the heart of so much of it, and so many of the issues in publishing with diversity kind of come back to that basis of making sure that people, regardless of what background they're from, can access the industry. And at the moment, things are changing a lot, but obviously, as people will know in SYP North, that it's still very heavily London weighted, and certainly was before. And so there's still very unequal standing points that people come from, trying to get into the industry. And so they wanted to found the network to shine a light on those issues, and also kind of just bring employees together in the company who were, from different backgrounds, who didn't grow up in the southeast, or were from, lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and just a place people could come together and kind of understand what that experience is like in publishing, really. And so they were the co-chairs for 2 years overall, I believe. And then, end of last year, Emma and I became co-chairs. And so we've kind of taken it up, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but obviously the whole aspect of Hachette opening regional offices, that's been a really important part of our aims and goals for this year, really.
Feels like a sort of re-kickstart for the network. We kind of have a very clear purpose now, and I think we're all, you know, agreed on the goals and the things that we want to achieve. And Sarah and Emma do a great job, so I think it's a really exciting year for us.
Brilliant, thank you. And maybe to give Sarah a little break from talking, what role do each of you have in the network, and what made you want to be a part of it? If we start with Kerri.
Yeah, sure. So I look after internal outreach. So it's basically sort of shouting as much as I can about our network to our colleagues in Hachette. And I think we have a really, in general, we have a really great response to the network, because not only is it, like Sarah was saying, people sort of like-minded people or from similar backgrounds, I think we do also get a lot of support from other colleagues who are just interested to hear about other paths and people who have come from other backgrounds. So yeah, I basically just talk about our events internally, help organise some internal events. Coming up, we've got a quiz actually next Wednesday, so I'll do a little plug for that, which is to raise money for the book trade charity, which obviously has a lot of similar aims to us in terms of representation and diversity. So that's something I'm working on currently. And I guess the main reason why I got involved was when I decided to move to the Manchester office. I kind of heard about the network more this year because of the regional offices, and just thought it would be a really good thing to get involved in. I'm from Belfast originally. I've spent a lot of time in Scotland and in the north of England, so I really feel like I want to champion diversity and regional employment, and trying to get people like me from backgrounds like mine into the industry, because I know firsthand sort of how difficult it can be.
Brilliant, thanks Kerri. And Ronnie, what about you?
I'm definitely, I definitely became interested in the diversity aspect. I mean, as someone from a lower socio-economic or working class, it's just easier to say, from a working class background, and you know, working at DK and then at Hachette, I haven't really seen many people like myself, or especially as you kind of look higher up, you know, when you get to board and senior management level, there's not many people who I see that look or sound like me, and I think that needs to improve, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about. And I think by all of us banding together under the All Together Network umbrella, I think it's something that we can change. And opening national offices is something that will also, I think, improve that. Hopefully, I like to think. And yeah, and I just think it would be great to have people from all kinds of backgrounds, you know, so as you would, you know, you want people from all genders and all sexualities, and you know, everything else. You want a good mix. You want to represent the whole of society, and I'm quite passionate about that. So
yeah, I mean, it comes down to representation really, because you know, a big thing in like children's publishing, for example, is that every child should be able to see themselves in a book, but it extends further than that. It extends to anyone who wants to pick up a book. You know, their voice and their background and their experience should be reflected. So yeah, I think we all have that kind of same perspective and approach to it, and we're all pretty passionate about it.
I think you only have to look at, you know, I don't know if this is like a bad thing to say or not, but I think you only have to look at what Marcus Rashford has done in the last year to see that there is still problems in society with, you know, helping out people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and there's still work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think just to add to all that, I think we're all really passionate about it, and kind of we all, from our different experiences and, you know, growing up in different places, we all know it can be really difficult if you come from, again, this might be, it's not a controversial thing to say at all, but I think publishing as an industry, you kind of realize as you get into it, you know, a lot is changing, but the initial model of publishing wasn't designed for people from outside London or from backgrounds that weren't very middle or upper class. And then certainly the stereotype people have of publishing, you know, they might think of it as how it was kind of 30, 40, 50 years ago. and that probably really isn't the case now. But I think some of that still lingers, and kind of trying to catch up in terms of offering opportunities to people outside London, taking into things like salaries. The big publishers are, they are doing a lot of work in trying to improve kind of transparency and pay bands and things that seem so obvious in other industries where I think they've kind of lagged behind in publishing, because it was sort of built on this old school model that just doesn't apply to society anymore. And we really are kind of working to, as Ronnie said, kind of have all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds. So kind of us being in the network is our little part of trying to do that.
Yeah, and I think having that umbrella is important, for all of us to be able to band together and talk about the things that do affect us, or that we have ideas about.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's a bit of a broad one, but what has the Altogether Network achieved so far, do you think, in the diversity and inclusion?
I think that regional offices is huge, and like with anything, when you're coming from a bigger publisher, sort of everything that you do is always met with some degree of not negativity, but like controversy, I guess. Yes, criticism, exactly. And I think from being sort of inside and being within a company who's trying to do that, I think we fully take that on board, and we understand the need to be sensitive in terms of embedding ourselves in different cities that already have very sort of strong and fantastic indie publishers. But I think we're already seeing, we've already started hiring direct into some of the regional offices. So whilst it gives the opportunity for people like us to move away from London, which is something that we want to do and we should be able to do, we are already hiring direct into those offices. And I think that's really great. And I kind of think we are putting our money where our mouth is to an extent by sort of not only opening the offices, but really trying to support regional hiring. I think it's a huge thing for Hachette to have achieved, and I really do hope it kind of sets the tone for other publishers, because I don't think publishing should be so London centric. I don't think people should have to sacrifice every other part of their life just in order to do a job that they love. You should be able to have it all, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of in terms of the achievements, obviously the network was kind of, when it was set up in 2018 and kind of developing itself, it's sort of making those steps into kind of putting these issues on the agenda. Because I know that when the network was first founded, people really weren't talking very much about regional diversity or kind of working class diversity in publishing. And I might be wrong, but I believe that we're still certainly, if not the only one of the only publishers with a network dedicated to this. I know that Penguin has an LGBTQ network and other networks, but I don't think anyone else has a network dedicated to these issues.
There wasn't one at Penguin when I was there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there still isn't. There might be others, I don't know if obviously have everyone's, but certainly Hachette's kind of led the way in that. And I think having the network, in terms of what it's achieved, starting with those kind of baby steps and making the issue there, and then how the national offices kind of came about. Actually, I didn't know until the other day how this came about. Was a few years ago, I think someone kind of put the question to our CEO and said, should there be regional offices? Why do we all have to work in London? And I think that kind of little germ of an idea sort of developed into there then being a conversation of, I think this was just before I arrived at the company, so this has all been kind of years in the making, and obviously being slowed down by COVID. But there was kind of a survey that went out, and the question was put to people: if you wanted to move out of London and work somewhere else, where would you like to go? And from there, they then had the list of 5 offices. I'm probably like jumping onto the next question, but that's the very brief outline of that. And that kind of really builds into what we've helped to achieve, the network, kind of pushing HR and pushing them, like simple things that Emma and I, the co-chairs, and all the network co-chairs do, is we'll talk to HR about things maybe they could be doing, or things they could be making sure that job adverts are consistent in terms of making it clear where the job's based, or making it clear that there's provisions available if you can't afford a train ticket to an interview, if you think pre-COVID times, and making sure that video interviews can be done, which again is standard now, but yeah, the little things like that. We're in touch a lot with different other departments in the company as well.
Also, I think in terms of what we've done, I think I know Kerri and Sarah will both agree that there's still more to do, and I think the staff census that that HR have organised will, once we have the information of what the makeup of the company is, will kind of help inform how we go forward with what we aim. I think. I don't know. Is Sarah, Kerri, do you agree? Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, yeah, like so many publishers, I think, if you follow things like the Bookseller, you'll see that a lot of publishers are now bringing out kind of their data on, like comparing the amount, the percentage of employees they have from certain backgrounds compared to like the last census or, the general UK population, and showing that there's still a lot of work to do. I think that's the whole thing with changing the story as well, is that kind of none of the networks want to kind of pat themselves on the back too much and say, oh, look what we've done. There's still so much work to do. And, I think the thing that's becoming apparent is that, publishers can't just say, oh, here's a traineeship or here's a work experience, and not offer anything kind of more sustainable alongside that. And I think publishers are starting to realize that they really need to, think about what people need, and people who want to get into publishing, but, for example, in our case, kind of don't want to move to London, or, couldn't afford to, or, whatever it might be, and thinking more long term, and, kind of Hachette is doing in terms of opening the offices and saying, well, we can hire into those offices, and that will, help attract people to the city, kind of build the cultural scene, but also give us a competitive edge, because we have people who don't live in London, and they're people with different perspectives, which, is incredibly helpful, really. So yeah, I think publishers can't really change until they know where things stand at the moment. And as Ronnie said, we have, and I'm sure other companies do, kind of running a staff census to get a real sense of people's backgrounds, and for the first time including questions about, more questions about socio-economic background, regional background, so they really know where people have come from, and from that how they can improve.
I think they're doing questions on regionality as well, I believe. So yeah, another good idea to see where people have come from, and
yeah, it's going to give a much clearer picture.
I'm quite actually looking forward to. I'm quite keen to see how that turns out, what the information is like.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like Ronnie said, I mean, in the office on a day-to-day, I don't really hear anyone else that sounds like me, or I would like to say that my accent is actually calmed down a lot, and I don't sound that Irish. I'm told it's different, but anyway, and it'd be interesting to see actually in an office of 900 people, or however many we have, how many came from where I come from, or how many, would I be able to relate to in my upbringing, my background. So I think it'll be really interesting.
Brilliant. So we've kind of mentioned them a lot so far, but a proper question now on the regional offices. So can you tell us a bit more about where they are, who's going to be heading the offices up, how many people, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we should have started by saying where they are. We're just launching into it.
We did a typical thing in publishing of being like, everyone knows what we're talking about.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sarah.
With locations, I can do more of the second bit. So
okay, sure. So yeah, locations. So we've got Manchester, Sheffield, Bristol, Edinburgh, and Newcastle. And I think in terms of kind of the size of those offices, we're definitely looking at flexible working spaces. So we've got kind of the core individuals who wanted to move up from the get-go, and we're hoping that as more people may want to move up, or as we're hiring more locally, we'll be able to expand kind of in line with that. That's the hope anyway. And a lot of the office spaces are kind of WeWork type spaces, so it would give us that kind of flexibility. I think Edinburgh is the biggest office, and then Bristol, Manchester's third, Sheffield, and then Newcastle, or Newcastle then Sheffield. But we're kind of talking, what is Edinburgh, around 20 people?
Yeah, I think it's slightly skewed because Hachette has an office in Glasgow, which is then moving to Edinburgh, and so it will bring everyone together, them and people who are moving. So I think in terms of numbers, I think I'm right in saying that they're expecting 50 people to move this year, and then I think for it to double essentially from the next year, because there's kind of another 50 who are saying they're interested. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a good second wave.
Yeah.
Of people who said they're interested. And something we've talked a lot about internally, but I think it's the thing that people might see us a little bit as guinea pigs at the moment. Kind of, we're the ones that are trying it, and we're kind of the first, like you said, the first wave of people who've moved out of London. And I think a lot of people kind of internally in publishing are kind of quite keen to see how that turns out and kind of how we get on. And then I think if they see that we're getting on well, then I think there'll be a lot more people who'd be interested in moving.
I think I'd say I'm one of those people.
Ronnie's the second wave.
I'm quite curious to see how it turns out, and yeah.
What if we all come back to London with our tail between our legs?
Oh no, that won't
not going to happen.
That won't be happening.
Because I think at the moment it's been a lot of people. I think most of the people who've moved are people either from those areas or kind of have strong connections.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be some, but I don't know too many people who've just decided to move kind of for, just for a life change.
Yeah, I think most people, it's a sense of like going home or going back to, where you grew up or where you have the kind of like family connections, which I think is also just even more important to people after COVID, because you've spent so long periods away from your family and friends and things. I think actually that also makes it really exciting for those of us who are moving to kind of be able to get back with family and loved ones. So I think then in terms of who's leading the offices, I don't know how it was decided. Do you know, Sarah? I don't know.
It wasn't completely random, but I think we kind of basically each office will have, they won't be managed as such, but each office will kind of have an office lead, and they'll sort of be the main contact for kind of, these are things we're discussing kind of internally at the moment, of like practical things of like who will pay for a printer and the stationery, and just like really practical things that like almost like imagine like kind of a startup business has to think of when they're kind of launching a small office together. But luckily we have people who can help with that. But yeah, so it'll be kind of an office lead in each office, be the sort of contact. And then within that, really, the teams will, it'll be a group of people who are there because they want to be in that city. Like they might not necessarily know each other beforehand, or certainly plans at the moment, people are from different divisions within Hachette, they might not have met before, completely different departments, and so they'll kind of have two teams really, because they'll be working virtually with their team who either mostly based in London, or in the case of some teams, I think where quite a few people have moved, they might be based around a few of the offices, kind of work virtually with their team there, but also build a new team in each city. And I think we as a network are really keen to make sure that each city has a team and people really bond, and you can make something really unique out of that, instead of it just being kind of people moving to a city, sat at a desk, that's it. And yeah, like with all the office spaces, I think Edinburgh will be because of numbers, they'll have like kind of a standalone office, but the others, it's more so we can move and kind of have the potential to grow. And so it's sort of having kind of the co-working spaces for now, and then seeing how they develop really, and kind of what the plans are down the line. I mean, there's lots of kind of, in each city, there's kind of cultural organisations we'd love to work more with. And kind of as Kerri said before, I think sometimes people can see this sort of thing as kind of a big company muscling in, and kind of getting in the way of what's already there. And I think we certainly as a network don't at all want to get in the way of kind of independent publishing that's there. And I think SYP North, obviously, as people will know, was set up in Manchester, an imprint of HarperCollins. I remember reading, they summed it up really well, saying that they know what their strengths are, they know what the indies' strengths are, and they're quite different things. We're a big kind of corporate publisher, we're generally publishing to a different market, but also, there's things we can learn from each other, and it's great having each other there, but it's just, we never want to get in the way of anything, or kind of, act as if we're kind of saving the day by coming into different cities, because they've been doing fine by themselves as well.
Yeah, we're not saying we need to boost literature or anything in those cities. We just, we want to work together and hopefully do some really nice things in collaboration with each other, and just basically make reading and books more accessible to anyone who wants to pick up a book and anyone who wants to get involved in the industry. That's the aim, basically.
Brilliant. So it maybe links in, I don't know whether there'll be a different answer to this, but what is the Altogether Network working on at the moment to achieve its aims?
There's a couple of different things. I mean, we've kind of, as networks within Hachette, we all state our goals for the year, and those are kind of the things that we work towards. And so a big goal of ours, we have a big event internally that we're still planning, so I probably can't say much about that, but we're planning kind of lots of different things to sort of celebrate the cities where we're moving to, and kind of give people, you know, who are interested in moving, an idea of what moving there might be like. And also the important part of it as well is to make sure that staff in London still feel connected, because we don't want it to kind of turn into sort of two different, you know, divisions of, you know, where people in London think they just like kind of their colleagues go off and they never see them again. We want to kind of show, which we have done in the last year, that people can work in different places and still be a team and work together really well. So yeah, so this event, you know, there's things going on that people will hear, I'm sure from us on social media and things, we'll hear a lot more about kind of as the year goes on. And we're also involved in the Working Class Writers Festival in Bristol, which is the first edition of the festival. And I think the plan is eventually they'll take it into different places around the country. But this year it's in Bristol in October, and Hachette is co-sponsoring it with Penguin, I believe. And the Altogether Network is really heavily involved in that in terms of events, and you know, we're working with authors who are kind of from regional backgrounds and working class backgrounds, and putting together events, and working as well kind of within the community in Bristol, kind of having events with editors and things like that. So those are really kind of our two big kind of tentpole events, but more generally we're just kind of working on, you know, building our membership. As Kerri said, the regional offices have sort of given us a new kind of, you know, a new boost. Yeah, exactly, kind of just introduce us to more people and more people interested in like hearing what we're doing. So yeah, I'm kind of working on building ourselves, you know, kind of partly through doing things like this. It's kind of not just showing people in publishing and in Hachette that we're there, but kind of, you know, more externally, that, you know, these conversations are being had, and that, you know, there's people who are really passionate about improving diversity and you know, giving a voice to people, you know, from backgrounds that we, you know, as we've all said, kind of not seeing many people like ourselves when we got into publishing, that we want to kind of improve that for others. So yeah, kind of building the profile of the network is sort of a really big aim of the year as well.
I think as well about improving the profile of the network is to show, I guess, to show people on the outside that you can get into publishing if you really want to. It's people like us who are, you know, we can show you that we're examples that it has been done, and that other people can do it too, and hopefully we'll have more opportunities than say when we first went into publishing. I think that's quite important, because otherwise people will carry on having that same impression that they've always had of, you know, a very upper class long lunch, you know, going out for lunch and never coming back until the next day or whatever.
I don't know about anyone else, but I was always eating at my desk. So this idea of long lunches out of the office, I'm like, show me the long lunches, please.
I know, sometimes I wonder if we got into publishing like 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, no, here's an expenses thing now, you can have one drink.
Yeah.
It has to be a soft one. But yeah, I'm trying to think more generally of our aims, really. Kind of, those are the main things we're certainly working on this year, and we kind of getting the offices, you know, getting people moved into the offices, and kind of that's the main thing for Hachette this year. And then, you know, we're kind of already starting to think of what we can do next year and sort of carry that on, because as I said before, you know, there's no point in just saying, oh, opening these offices, the staff from London who'd like to move can move, and then we'll do nothing else. You know, that would be completely pointless. So we're, as Kerri said, you know, there's already people who are starting to be hired into the offices, and you know, there'll be more going on in terms of how we can build on those offices and how we can really reach people in different areas. And you know, part of this, we've talked a lot about kind of the staffing side of things, but the really important thing as well is that we want to, you know, attract readers from different places. And you know, the publishing can be so London centric, and it's true that obviously London is a huge market for books, but I think we kind of, publishing still thinks very much in terms of London and, you know, what people in London are interested in, and doesn't think as much about, you know, what someone in Sheffield or, you know, Manchester or wherever might actually want to read. And I think there's been so many examples of books that have kind of taken off unexpectedly that can sell in huge numbers. I think, I don't know why I thought this.
Shuggy Bean is like a perfect example.
Yeah.
You know, half of it's written in Scots, and like to go on and do what it's done is just phenomenal. And I think that really highlights to people, you know, that not only readers and what do readers want outside of London, but think about all the authors, you know, author costs as well. The same thing, getting an agent, getting down to London, all the costs involved in that can put people off even giving it a go, and we might be missing out on amazing stories that need to be told, but unfortunately the authors feel like there's a barrier for them as well. So I think it's just all about opening up the whole industry, not only staff but authors and readers as well, and just making it more accessible and more representative of the UK, not just London.
Yeah, definitely.
What advice do you have for anyone from the lower socio-economic backgrounds or regional backgrounds who might be watching?
Loads.
Oh, that's tough.
I know, it's like who kicks up first? I think I'll just start off quickly. I think Ronnie, you know, said it before, you know, I think we all know it's so hard to get into publishing, and I would never want to sugarcoat it and pretend it isn't, or pretend it isn't a lot harder when you're not from somewhere near London. And, you know, the thing that I found is that I think the thing that really woke me up to the issue was the fact that I went to university in London, and so I could do work experience at publishers and different things. And when I realized that there was no way I would have got into publishing without being in London, like aside from go to university there, I didn't know anyone. You know, my family didn't know anyone. I could never have stayed with anyone to do an internship or whatever. And so it was kind of the realization of, oh, you know, this career that you love, that's the only reason why you could get into it. It's realizing how kind of wrong that was. So yeah, I'd never want to say that it isn't much harder. But, you know, as Ronnie said, I think if you really want to, you know, there are ways of getting in, and things are improving rather than, you know, going backwards. And yeah, you know, we're examples that you can do it. And
you can do it without needing to do like an internship or a traineeship. You know, if you've got transferable skills, even if you're not working in publishing, it's possible. That's how I got into it. I had transferable skills, you know, and I just applied them on my CV in a way that I thought a book person would actually quite like, but and it worked somehow. But yeah, I'd say, you know, you've got to persevere and try, because if you don't try, you'll certainly never know. And publishing's changing, you know, things are becoming maybe slower than we actually want, but there are, you know, things are becoming more diverse. We're opening more regional offices. There's more people being recruited into, you know, things are progressing. So I would say certainly keep trying.
Yeah, I think it is just keep trying. And I know, like, you know, I've only been working in the industry for 2 years. It's very, very fresh in my mind how difficult it was. And I think you just have to, it's hard sometimes. People tell you, you know, oh, you're trying to get into publishing, or you're going to have to send off like 50 applications. And, you know, don't get psyched out by the whole process, and don't take yourself out of the running before you've even began. Because the one thing that I always told myself when I was, you know, applying and getting rejected and applying, you know, like, why not me? So why not you? Why should it not be you rather than some other person who has a different background from you and a different education? You know, actually, that doesn't mean that they're any better than you. It just means that they maybe have the confidence that you're lacking, because you're questioning yourself and you're already psyching yourself out before you get into it. So just, you know, look yourself in the mirror and say, why the hell not me? It can be me.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, I mean, I remember when I joined Hachette, and I remember when I was filling out the job application form on their website, and they I don't know if they're still doing it, but they had a system involved where you weren't allowed to put, if you put he, she, or, you know, whatever pronoun you are, you know, it wouldn't let you proceed with the application if you tried to put your age or what university you went to. It wouldn't let you proceed with those. So it's kind of trying to take out those factors which people may unconsciously, you know, judge you on.
It's blind hiring, and most companies are doing it now, which is great. But I think, you know, you also then have nerves. Okay, great, you've got an interview, and then you're like, oh gosh, like you psych yourself out of it again. That's my experience anyway. I think doing stuff like getting involved with SYP is fantastic, because I think having a group of other people who are also just trying to get a foot in the door is really encouraging, to know that you're not the only one who might be finding it difficult. And I think also, you know, publishing Twitter is great and people are active and they're engaged, but you know, it can be hard sometimes when you maybe are constantly seeing other people posting that, oh, they've got their job, and it's great and you're really happy for them, but like, you know, don't read so much into it that you get yourself into a headspace of thinking, well, everyone else is getting their job and I'm not getting mine. Because, you know, for every person that's posting that they've got their first job in publishing, you know that there's, you know, other applicants who didn't. So I think it's just, publishing Twitter is great, networking is great, but just don't bog yourself down in the social media side of it too much. Because it can sometimes I'm like deleting Twitter off my phone because it just like does my head in. So you've got to have a healthy balance.
No, it's so true. Yeah, and I mean, in trying in terms of other advice, yeah, it's come back to me kind of, it's something that an ex-colleague of mine said to me once of, I think we're kind of having a conversation about, we both come from quite working class backgrounds. Well, I think for me, I'd say more kind of, and it's so horrible trying to define class. I wouldn't say I'm from a working class background, but certainly a regional background, and certainly one that had no access to kind of creative industries at all. And we were talking about it, and she said, you know, the thing to remember is that these people might seem very intimidating if they've gone to a private school or they've done this or that or whatever. She's like, but you're all in the same room now. Like you're all there. Everything you've done is, you know, all your paths have led to the same point. Like you're all in the same room. Like, you know, don't think you're any less worthy of anyone else. Like, you know, there's literally no reason to think that. You're all there. And yeah, I've taken that on board, and like I remembered it loads of times, sort of in my career. Because there have been times, I think we've, you know, probably all had the same thing of feeling a little bit out of place, or realizing, like, I think my accent, you know, I kind of felt that I kind of a joke, I have a publishing accent and a real accent, and like toning it down, and like it shouldn't be like that at all. But you know, I've had kind of well-meaning but older members of staff. Someone once told me to speak properly, which I never quite understood what they meant by that. But kind of, that's what I'm trying to say is, you know, be prepared maybe for feeling a bit out of place sometimes, and you know, there's still a long way to go, and that might happen, but don't let that make you think that you're not worthy of being in publishing, or kind of you're not deserving of it. And yeah, as Kerri said, I was rejected for so many jobs, and it's so hard because it's such a competitive industry, and like I think you just have to, it's so hard, because I always did, but really try not to take it personally. And you know, ultimately someone has to get the job, which means other people won't, but you know, it's everyone who applies is always so good that it's really tough. I think just try and keep that faith in yourself, and know what you can do, and know what skills you can bring. Like, you know, like Ronnie said, you know, publishers are getting better at appreciating transferable skills. You know, if you've worked in a supermarket, or I mean, I was in temping in an accounts department, which I was absolutely terrible at. I was like numbers and wasn't it? But I did that for a few months, and just, it was my first experience in an office, and so I'd been able to show that I had experience of working with people, and you know, kind of just knowing what working life was like, because I hadn't really done it before, like kind of come straight out of uni. So you know, there's so many things that, you know, you think might not be very useful to transfer to publishing that actually really might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you only have to look at Penguin. You know, Penguin are not looking at degrees on CVs anymore. So if they're not looking at that, then what are they looking at? You know, they're looking at, you know, what you bring as a person, your people skills, transferable skills, you know, what experience you have, or maybe, you know, what experience you have of doing something else. How do you apply yourself? It's a new world, I think, with regards to hiring.
I'm pretty sure.
I like to think so anyway.
Yeah.
sorry, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure Hachette now, I mean, there's certainly no information on job adverts about, needing a degree anymore, which even that is a big thing. I think even when I was starting to look for jobs 5-6 years ago, I can't remember if it was Hachette, to be honest, but, there were definitely big publishers that still said, we would like you to have, achieved a 2-1 degree, blah, blah. Yeah. And that's definitely not happening anymore, which, is a really positive thing. And does obviously opens up, the range of applicants who feel that they can apply. But yeah, I think all of that, I think we've all sort of said, is just believe in yourself and believe in what you can do. And, clearly if you're in an SYP, you love books and really, are passionate about being in publishing, or you're starting out in publishing and still kind of feel a bit kind of a fish out of water. Yeah, just believe in yourself, really. I think that's the main thing I could say.
Yeah, and I'll just say one last thing about it, because I could go on forever, but when anytime I've been struggling and felt like I wasn't getting anywhere, my granny, Irish grandmother, always said to me, what's for you won't go by you, which is a bit wishy-washy. It's a bit like whatever, karma and fate, but it is quite comforting. So just remember that something that you might think is, you've nailed the interview, it's the perfect job for you, and you end up not getting it, just wait until you get your chance to shine, and you'll look back and think, well, that's why I didn't get it. This is the reason, because this was what was actually meant for me. Yeah, it's a bit wishy-washy, but I believe in that. So
that's like my dad. My dad told me when I was like, I remember graduating from uni and getting turned down for jobs and kind of getting really down about it. I think he always said, like, I would say rejected from a job, and he was like, don't use the word reject. He was like, they've picked someone else, they haven't rejected you,
yeah,
someone
selected.
Exactly. He's putting a positive spin on it.
Yeah, I love that.
Just kind of, again, it relates back to not taking it personally. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. And sometimes there could be experiences in interviews where that you could have done certain things better, and that's all part of it. But there's nothing wrong with you. It's just things that you can learn. And so yeah, it's really hard. It's so hard to say don't take it personally. But yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest bit of advice, really. Yeah, just believe in what you can bring, and whether you want to work in London or whether you want to stay in the North. Just believe in what you can do, and kind of, yeah, what you can bring.
Brilliant. That's some very motivational advice.
Courtesy of our families.
It's where the best advice comes from. I think now we're going to go on to questions from the audience. So I think Kate will be hitting us with those.
Hello, thank you so much for all your points there. They were all really amazing. I was like nodding in agreement. Yes, we've had some really, really great questions. So I'll try and answer as many as possible all together. But any that we don't answer, everyone just check out our social media at SYP North, and I'm sure we'll try and follow up somehow. So the first question is, to what extent do you think publishers support relocation? Do you think that a lot of publishers jump towards applicants who live close by, for example, in London? And do you think the pandemic has changed this?
I would say, in all honesty, there's a range of people who think different things in publishing, and I there will be kind of an old school, that's not necessarily in terms of age, but people with kind of an old school mindset who kind of think, oh, it'd be easier to have someone who lives near London, like it's simpler. And I think that's definitely there, but I think the pandemic has definitely changed things, and people realizing that actually ideas they had before, don't really hold. And with all of us in the company, I had literally everyone working at home, still managing to produce books that none of us ever actually saw, really, apart from people at the printers and distribution, but we all managed to make that happen. And so kind of the idea that people can't work in different places kind of got completely thrown out. I think it's still baby steps, and I think there will still be people, or maybe even organizations, that kind of resist the idea, but it's a simple thing to do, but it doesn't mean that is what should happen. And I'm really glad that Hachette is actually keeping to its word, and they will always want to reassure people it's like, this is actually happening, we are actually moving, we are actually kind of serious about it.
I think if anything, COVID has accelerated it, because it's shown that, you know, it really is possible, and I think it's helped move it quicker than it previously was.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard for us to say to what degree any other publisher supports relocation, because we don't know, you know, what's going on internally. But I think certainly, you know, to be optimistic in the industry, there has been a shift, and people have realized what can be done, you know, remotely or regionally. And so, you know, hopefully, I do think it will be a slow burn. It's not going to be a quick change by any means, but I do think that it will be changing, and hopefully, you know, publishers will realize sort of the value of keeping flexible working and supporting relocation.
Yeah, and sorry, to add to that as well, as publishing as a whole, I think, as Sarah and Kerri will probably agree, is a pretty liberal. There's a lot of liberal-minded people in the industry, and I think there is a desire to do better, and at least I like to think there is. So, you know, I don't think it is lip service that they're, you know, it isn't lip service, because they are opening these national offices and they are hiring people into there. So, I think it is moving in the right direction, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Thank you. Everybody's been very interested in the regional offices, as expected. Are there any plans for any internships or anything like that, do you think?
I would say on that, maybe stay tuned for next year.
Yeah.
There's certainly, you know, there aren't plans in place, but certainly, as I said, as part of our aims as a network and as a company, we want to consolidate on, you know, the progress that's been made this year in moving. So yeah, I think, you know, within the next year or two, there'll certainly be, you know, plans like that. I couldn't say because they don't exist yet, but no, certainly, yeah, we're committed to kind of, you know, opening up
driving
things.
that forward. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are the words I was looking for.
It's a great idea. Something we should probably discuss as a network.
Something we should do.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got another question here that I think a lot of people might be able to relate to. So this person said, right now I am working full time alongside other paid gigs to try and get money any way I can so that I have the opportunity to move to London. How did you all handle saving and handling the typically low income of publishing jobs?
It's hard, like it's hard. I mean, yeah, I worked through both my degrees, and you know, if you want to move to London, and this isn't to put anyone off moving to London, because London is great. It's a great city. It's a great, vibrant publishing industry in London. And if that's what you want, that's also absolutely fine if you want to move into it. But I would say definitely check out the Book Trade charity. They give grants, and they support people who are trying to get down to London. They have recently opened up their own not block of flats, but you know, they have a range of accommodation, exactly, subsidized accommodation for people who want to move down to London but who can't afford I mean, first of all, the deposit on your flat, for example. They will help fund you get to interviews. They will even help fund you, doing the small things and the things that you don't realize actually adds up and gets in the way of you getting there. So I'd say, you know, definitely check them out. We have loads of colleagues across the company who have used the Book Trade charity to kind of get their foot in the door. So you know, give them a look in, and they're committed to kind of supporting anyone who wants to have a go down in London. They're committed to supporting them.
Yeah, I'd say as well, obviously it depends whether you're kind of generally thinking about moving or you're in a position of applying for jobs or you know, kind of further down the track, but kind of to find out what benefits the company has, because for example at Hachette, you know, you can get a loan for a deposit, I think, for when you've moved somewhere, and so basically you take out the loan to the company and then it kind of comes out your pay. But
also for transport as well, they offer it within Hachette, so you can get your Oyster card, they will pay for it, and then you pay them back, obviously interest free because you're loaning from them. So, and I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine other, you know, bigger publishers certainly would offer similar perks.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of, you know, find out what they offer, because they might offer more than you think. And certainly things have improved in the last few years in that sense. But yeah, the Book Trade charity is definitely a great place to start, you know. kind of in terms of grants or kind of just general advice, really.
And I've got a question that's kind of an all-encompassing one for everybody. This will be the last question, and all the other ones we will answer some way or another. But if you could go back to the start of your career in publishing and give yourself one piece of advice with the hindsight you got, what would it be?
Probably no one else knows what's going on either. But genuinely, you know, like there's days where I'm sitting and I'm like, God, I don't know, I'm getting a cup of tea because I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. And I know it's the same for my line manager, it's the same for the MDs. You know, you have days where you realize that we're all just trying to do the job to the best of our ability, but no one has all the answers. No one starts with all the knowledge. And, you know, even as you progress, you're still constantly learning. So just don't be intimidated and think that everyone is better than you, because they're really not. They're just like-minded people. And at the end of the day, everyone just loves books, loves reading. And so you can at least relate to people on that level.
I got asked this same question when I did a thing for SYP London like half a year ago, and my advice is the same as it was then, is that the first 6 months is going to be such a steep learning curve, and you're going to hear so much information. You're going to get things wrong, you're going to get things right, but just not be so harsh on yourself, or like so hard. I was quite hard on myself and found it quite tough. It's a very competitive industry, and you know, there's a lot of pressure to do things, to get things right, but yeah, I say don't be so hard on yourself, because people will help you and people understand, you know, as much, you know, whatever background or, you know, wherever people are from, we're all still people, you know, and we all will help each other out, and everyone has a good day, everyone has a bad day. Don't be so hard on yourself. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think mine would just be, kind of ties into both those really, but yeah, just never be afraid to ask like for help or kind of ask a question. I think I always thought, like, you know, if I seemed to be asking loads of questions, it'd be like, oh, she's not understanding, or just not really getting it or something. And publishing is an industry that, you know, again, has like a lot of really old terms people often use, and terms that like you never really understand what that means. And like I'm still learning. Like I learned something today that I literally never knew what it meant. And I've been in publishing for like nearly 6 years, like just different terms we'll use, and you can think of what is that? What does that mean? Kind of sat at your desk sort of panicking if someone's asking you to do something. And yeah, just always ask, and you know, don't, you know, but like I said before, believe in yourself, but also accept that, you know, you're new to this, and like of course you can't know everything. I think often people if they've managed to kind of get into a job in a really competitive industry, think I must know everything, you know, how, you know, don't want to show any signs of weakness at all. And that's the thing, is that's really not a weakness, kind of asking questions. It's just helping you learn, and people will be happy to help, and they'll remember when they were assistants themselves, or you know, when they were starting out. So yeah, I think that's my main one really.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice from all of you. Thank you so much. So we've now hit 7:30 now. So we're going to come to a close, if that's okay with everybody. It was a really, really inspiring and interesting chat, and we really loved speaking to you all. So thank you so much, Sarah, Kerri and Ronnie, for coming and joining us tonight. And thank you so much to our wonderful chair, Tasha from SYP North. You did a really great job. And for everybody watching, we would appreciate any kind of feedback that you could provide, if it's on Twitter or you want to email us or anything like that, good or bad, that would be great to hear from you. And we're really sorry for any questions we didn't get around to answering, but we will try and answer that somehow, maybe on a blog post or something. We also have a newsletter and lots of other different things going on, so do follow us, and they'll be kind of popping up in the chat now. Once again, thank you for being so engaged and interactive, and for asking all your questions. And what else? Oh, and we have a book club that we run kind of every month-ish, with SYP Oxford, if anybody wants to join that. And we have similar panel events coming up as well, which will be like this, if anybody's interested in that. So yeah, but thank you so much to our panelists for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Great, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.